In this video, I want to dig into Firestore security rules to lock down who is allowed to read quizzes from our platform, who's allowed to create quizzes in our platform, and who's allowed to update and delete quizzes from our platform. If you head to your Firestore database and you go to the Rules tab, you will see a rules syntax that allows you to specify some security rules related to paths in your document. So there's some boilerplate here. Really, the first 3 lines are boilerplate for Firestore of specifying what the rules version is, that these are applied to the Firestore service, that these are matching documents in our database. And then the stuff that we're going to be editing is in between that boilerplate. And these statements allow us to match a path in our database and then apply rules related to reading and writing data at that path in our database. This default one that we're getting here, and we edited this ages ago, this is matching any document anywhere in our database and saying that anyone is allowed to read or write to it. This was fine for our testing purposes and our development purposes, but we definitely want to lock this down as we move into production so that we can control who is allowed to read and write in our application. Where I recommend starting when looking at securing your Firestore database is the secure and validate section of the documentation. The write-up here is really good and goes through the rules from that boilerplate to explain, what's going on with that boilerplate and how the rules are structured in the syntax where you match a path and then you apply your security rules to reading and writing. And you can apply these separately. They don't have to be together in one line using Boolean conditions. And there are a couple examples here, like you can see an example of locking down everything in the database so that you have to be logged in before you can read and write. You can lock things down so that no one is allowed to edit any document or read any document directly from your client-side application. And you can do what we did, which was allow everyone to be able to read and write regardless of whether they're logged in or regardless of whether they own the quiz in the application. If you head to the structure security rules section, it breaks down how some of these rules look in real-world situations. So here, you got our boilerplate up at the top, and then they're showing us, instead of matching everything in our document, you can actually match just documents in the cities collection here. And then you can apply different conditions for when someone tries to read documents from the cities collection versus when someone tries to write to documents in the cities collection. And if you read through this here, they're also telling you that you can put these capturing wildcards here in your path. So this line is saying match any document in the cities collection. And then we're going to be able to, if you needed to write a rule that's based on like the ID here of the document, you could actually use that city as you're writing out some of your rules. So read and write are useful, but you can actually break that down into sub-rules. So a read rule here is really 2 separate rules. It's get, which applies to single documents, and list, which applies to trying to read or query things from the whole collection. So if we tried to get cities/NYC, this would be the rule that we encounter. But if we tried to get every document in the cities collection, this would be the rule that we encounter. Here, write can be broken down into create, update, and delete. So we can specify different conditions for when someone's allowed to create a new document in the cities collection, when someone's allowed to update an existing document in the cities collection, and when someone is allowed to delete a document from the cities collection. And there's a lot of good stuff in the documentation here, like explaining that these rules don't cascade. So if you have a sub collection in one of your documents, the rules for the document don't apply to the sub collection, and describes how overlapping statements work. So if you have multiple rules that apply to the same place, if any of them are true, that means that the operation is allowed to succeed, which can come in handy in some situations. So I recommend digging into this. What I'm going to do now is switch back to our rules here and start writing our rules for our database, and pull in the concepts that we just saw in the context of our database. So what we're going to want to do is create a match here that matches our quizzes collection, and then we can use a wildcard here to capture the ID of the quiz. So this rule that we're creating is going to apply to every quiz in the quizzes collection, because this is a wildcard here. And then we could write a rule to allow read or get or list or create or update or delete. So we're going to be able to use those verbs to define permissions for each type of operation. What I think will be handy is to put some comments in here to actually write out what we're trying to do. So comments, you can put them in here using, I think using this. Let's see. Oh, nope, it is 2 slashes. Will allow us to insert a comment in here. So we want to make all quizzes publicly readable. But let's actually spell publicly right. So any quiz in our database is readable by anyone, which means I don't have to be logged in to check out quizzes within the app, and I don't have to be logged in to go in and play quizzes, which that's what we want. We want a platform that's easy for people to get into, and then they can create an account later when they want to create their own quizzes. So any logged in user can create a quiz. And then, so that would just mean that, you have to come in here and log in before you can actually create a new quiz. And then we also have, let me open this up in another tab, our quizzes set up so that the owner ID is stored as a field inside of the document. So that means that we, in terms of our rules here, only the owner can update or delete their quiz. So these are the separate situations we want to handle. So for reading, we could just do allow read if true. We could also do more granularly. You could do an allow get and allow list to handle the 2 sub operations in read. That's kind of up to you if you want to control the permissions. In our case, we don't need any more control than this. To set up a rule for logged in users being allowed to create a quiz, we're going to use the create rule here and say that you can create a rule if your request.authorization is not null. And this is coming from Firestore. So when we log in and we submit these database requests from our client-side application, the Firestore library or the Firebase library is going to send that authorization information along. So it'll be filled in if they've logged in, and it'll be null if they're not logged in. So we're only going to allow them to create something if it's not null. And then the last rule that we want to set up here is we want to allow someone to update or delete. And you can use white space here to break things out if your conditions are long. So I'm going to say you're allowed to update and delete if the request.auth is not null, meaning that you're logged in, And we can join on a second condition here to say that the request.auth.uid is equal to the resource.data.owner.id. So this is the same thing we're doing here, making sure they're logged in. This is saying the authorization information that's come along with the request. Does that ID for the user, so the ID that is stored under our authentication here for each user, this UID, does that match our data that we've got? So resource refers to the document that we're matching here. So the resources data, does the UID match the owner ID that's in that resource data? So if we look back here, we just make sure that this is the field that we want to match on. Lowercase o, capital I, lowercase d, owner ID. And we should have a rule here that enforces that you're logged in and that you're the owner. And we could give that a publish. We're also going to want to remove the default rules that are here that matched anything and let anyone read or write. So let's get rid of that, and we can use some white space to kind of space out our new rules from the boilerplate. And one thing that can be really helpful is using the rules playground here to simulate requests to places in your database. So you can simulate a get, a create, an update, or a delete and see what happens with your rules. So if we do a get for something that's in our quizzes database, and the ID doesn't matter, so I can kind of type in some gibberish. It's just looking at kind of like the path structure here. This would be our quiz ID, and that's our collection. If we run a get, it shows us that that is allowed because we have said that reads are true. And if I change this to false and try running this, our read is denied. So that's great. Looks like we can read any document that's in here. Doesn't matter what that ID is, we're always allowed to read it. And then we could look at the create operation. So when you switch over to create here, we've still got the same location, but now we have the ability to kind of build a document that we would be submitting to send to our playground here. In our case, we don't have any rules that are based on the data that's sent or any validation rules, so we don't need to build a document. But if we run this without turning on authentication, this is going to be denied. And then if we turn on authentication here, you can optionally fill in some information about the fake user who's doing this, like put in a UID or put in an email, phone number, name. In our case, we're just checking to see whether they're authorized at all, so we don't need to know their ID or what their provider was. So if we run this now, we should be able to see this passing. And the update delete, these I don't think we're really going to be able to test in the playground here, because if we try to update one of these, there is no way for us in the playground to specify what the data at that location is. Because this data here is the request that we're sending along. So what are we saying we want to update? So this is one that we're going to have to actually test either in our application, or if you're curious, there's a online emulator and a way to set up a local emulator on your machine to test those things. So what I want to do here is let's close the rules playground and make sure that let's dismiss this. So I've got no unsaved changes because I don't see the publish popping up here. And what I want to do is try using our application. And so I should be able to go to quizzes and still see things listed. That's because this read is true. If I were to flip this to be false and publish it and come back here and try to refresh and run this page, we're going to see something has gone wrong. And the actual error that we dump to our console is that there are missing or insufficient permissions. And keep in mind that it can take some time for these rules to propagate out to your application. They say something like 10 minutes for how long it could potentially take. Just keep that in mind as you're doing your development and testing things out. It's going to publish that, give this another run, and we can see that we're able to read. We should hopefully be able to create here. So if we go home, create new quiz, and test permissions, 1, 2, 3, medium, save. Looks like that went through, and we can just double check the database here. Here's our test permissions, which looks good. This one's a little bit harder to test in terms of our application because we have a few levels of things that are going on in our application for the edit page. Like we have our edit page that uses the use user hook, and I think we also have in our app here, yes, we have our authenticated route, so our client-side route protection that doesn't let us even get to the edit page if we have not logged in. So the best way for us to test that would be to not go through the flow of the edit user page, but to maybe use another test page like we had set up previously, that we have this demos route in our application that loads this internal demos page that we were using before. So if we want to test a logged out user, what I might do here is sign out, and then let's blow away the contents of the demo page. And we're going to put a save button on it and go to demos. Okay, so there's a save button. And what we want to do with the save button here is use our use quizzes once hook. Const quiz is equal to use quizzes, or use quiz once, sorry, not quizzes. And we will use an ID from our database. I'm just going to grab this one and paste that in here as the ID. And then on click, we will do quiz dot, we'll pass in a function here that does quiz.set and does a dummy title. And our use quiz once hook we had set up to console log errors in the read process, in the set process, and in the delete process. So here on this demos page, we now have a button that is hooked up to talk to this quiz and try to do a set anytime you click the save button. We haven't really handled the loading state, so I'm going to just wait a second before I click save, and then see that we get a missing or insufficient permissions error popping up. So this is showing up actually probably from our update rule here. So let's go ahead, and if we make a new ID here, this set operation should actually trigger a create. So give it a save, and we're still seeing missing or insufficient permissions. And if I turn off our rule, just to sort of convince ourselves that this is working here, if we'll allow it create, if true, save and publish, and test save, which doesn't look like it spit out a new error, and we now see that 123 document in here. So I could delete that. And we now know that our rule was working here to enforce that you're logged in. And we can test the allow, update, and delete in kind of a similar way. So on our demos page, we can, let's call this test update, test delete. And what we want to do to test out that rule, this is enforcing that the user is logged in. So if we're not logged in, that should fail. So we should test that. And then we should also test that the auth UID, so the logged in user, matches what's in the quiz. So we'll test this first, make sure that I'm logged out. And if I go to demos, and did I save this? No. If I try either of these, we should hit an error about not having permissions to update or delete, which is good. And then to test the other situation, I can log in here and head to /demos. And when I go click these buttons, we want to hook it up to a quiz that this user doesn't own. So if I look here, I don't own this quiz because my user ID, which I can see in my authentication, is PFA. And this quiz here doesn't start with PFA. So I'm going to try that one. So now I am trying to update and delete a quiz that I don't own, even though I'm logged in, missing an insufficient, missing or insufficient here. So our rules are taking effect to enforce that the quizzes are publicly readable, that you have to be logged in to create a quiz, and that you have to be the owner to update or delete a quiz. And as you can see, we can test some of that in the rules playground. You can also test some of that in the emulator. And then you do generally want to do some kind of test of your application from the client side to see if these rules are applied how you expect them. And sometimes that can mean going through the normal flow of your application. And sometimes that can mean, like, let's just create a dummy component that tries to do something that our rules should disallow. So at this point, we've got functioning rules, we've locked down the security around our application, and if you're working on your own application, will want to dig into some of the documentation here when you're trying to design rules for your specific situation. Like if you're looking for how to design rules for sub-collections, checking out the hierarchical data section, or you're doing some things and you hit some limits around the security rules, you can check out the security rules limits here. And if you want to dig deeper, checking out the writing conditions for security rules goes into some of the stuff we did here, like with joining multiple conditions or reading properties from your documents, or reading properties from the update that's being sent and making sure that those properties that are being sent along are valid. So there's a lot that you can do with Firebase security rules. We've scratched the surface here, but we have locked down our application so that we have some security around creating and updating and deleting quizzes in our application. In the next video, we'll dig into actually updating our form here that we used to create quizzes and update and delete quizzes so that it actually renders everything from the quiz information, including the questions that are in the quiz document.